Hello folks, welcome to the channel Jose. Today we're going to give you an idea how to replace a radiator on a 91 to a 94 Toyota Tercel, and this applies for the manual transmission. The automatic transmission has two lines or two hard lines that come over from the transmission, and they attach themselves to the radiator, and that's for the cooling on the transmission. But this doesn't apply on this car because this is a manual transmission. So this is for a manual transmission Toyota. So today the most important thing about this is that you want to have the right parts, the radiator, the coolant that you're gonna be needing, the amount and the coolant that you need for it, and the catch pan for the oil coolant. So the most important part about this, you don't want the system to be hot. You want to let the car cool down completely before you start getting into the system, because you can get burned. So for this system, we're going to be just replacing the radiator, and it cracked on us, so we're going to give you an idea how to replace it. You want to make sure that you have the right part for this job, and you want to take your time on this. It's pretty simple, and hopefully this is useful for any radiator replacement that you want to do. So with that said, let's get started. Okay folks, so before we start, we disconnected our battery, and after that, what you want to do is there's going to be this air intake tube, and we're going to be removing 3 bolts. So it's going to be this one, 1, 2, 3. There's another one right in this area, and they're 10 millimeters, and we're going to be using an extension with a 10 millimeter socket to loosen them and take them off, so we can extract and we can start exposing the radiator and the fan and all that stuff that we have to take out of here. So now that we have removed this plastic, we can put our container on the bottom to start draining the fluid out, because it's going to give us access through this side to remove the plug from the top, and we don't have to be underneath. So we just put our container underneath and loosen the plug and start draining our radiator. We're going to loosen that plug right there from the bottom of the radiator. As you can see, the radiator's in bad conditions down there, so we're going to remove that. We're going to loosen it with a container underneath to catch antifreeze or the coolant, and then that's the reason we remove the air box intake tube, to have access for all that, the radiator and the fan and the hoses and all that, so that way we can work on that area. So once you have loosened the plug down there and liquid start coming out, I will recommend to take off the radiator cap so air comes in and lets gravity do its job on letting the antifreeze drop. So remove this, and now we start taking our top hose off from the radiator. And now we'll remove the hose from the reservoir. So now what we have to do is we have to remove our fan from the radiator, and to do that we have to disconnect that fan from there, that connector, and then we have to remove 1, 2, there's another bolt down there, and then that one down there, which is 4 bolts for the fan. So you can take it off and bring it out, and then that's why we have to remove the hose, upper hose, to get the fan out. We take the fan out, and then this fan has 4 bolts that we were talking about, 2 on the top and 1, 2 on the bottom. I would recommend taking the 2 on the bottom first, because the weight of the radiator is going to give you some trouble when you're trying to take the bottom 2. So take the bottom 2 out, and then the top, and then you bring it out. Another thing you have to remove to get the radiator brackets off is this plastic right here. You have to remove 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Phillips screws or bolts, and then once we remove that, that will give us a lot of access to the brackets on the radiator. The whole clamps it down into the frame of the car. So we remove this plastic. So right now we're gonna close our plug, and we're gonna take out the last hose in the bottom to drain the whole liquid out. So we were waiting for most of the liquid to come out through the plug, but now we're gonna close the plug and remove the hose, and we put our container right underneath the hose, and then we can start removing the clamps or the brackets that hold the radiator to the car. And so we do that. So these brackets are the ones that hold the radiator into the car. They bolt down into the frame, and then this hump or this groove falls right on top of the radiator cap, and then radiator plastic cap, and then it holds and pressures it down so it doesn't move. There's 2 of them, and they bolt down by a 12mm bolt. So all we have to do is we disconnected the hoses, the brackets from the radiator to the frame. So now we can pull the radiator straight out. So now when we bought this car, they told us that the car overheated and they didn't know why. So the radiator is just in really bad shape, and that's why it overheated, because the radiator wasn't even cooling down the car. So now we're replacing it. So now we can start putting our radiator back in. This is the old one, and we got the new one. It's obviously, and now we're gonna put the new one back into the engine. So this is gonna be a lot of improvement to this car. We're looking downwards from the top of the car, and you see the hole right there and the hole right over there. That's where the bottom of the radiator has to line up. So we're gonna start feeding the radiator in, and we'll show you what the bottom of the radiator looks like that has to go in there. So this right here and this right here are the points that go inside those circles. So that's how you line up the radiator on the bottom, and then the brackets take care of the part of tightening it down into the frame of the car. So now that we have the radiator on the bottom piece, we're gonna secure it to the frame by using the 1-2 clamps with a 12mm bolts on. So we put those on. So now we have a radiator right in there. So what we have been taking these plugs because we don't want to drop anything in there. So as we need them, we'll start removing them. So what we can do now is we can put our bottom radiator hose, and then we can put our fan on. So we have put the bottom hose in, and we tighten down the clamp, and make sure your drain point is completely tightened. When you add the coolant, it doesn't start draining out there. So you want to make sure that that's tight. The drain point is completely tight as well. And then now we can start putting our fan on, and then we'll put our top hose on. So right now, this is your radiator right here. We put the fan in, and then we put the top 2 bolts on. We haven't tightened it completely, because what we're going to be doing is we're going to have to put the bottom ones on, so that way we can have a little play. So we can these will hold the weight of the fan, help us out, and then we can put them on. Once we put the bottom ones, we tighten it, and then we can plug our fan back on. So now we have put our fan on, we have tightened it down so we can plug it in, and then we can start putting our hose back, upper hose back in, and then clamp it down, and then start working on our fluid. So now we start putting our upper hose back in, clamp it down. Okay folks, so we have everything back on the radiator. We haven't put the air duct in, or the piece of the plastic that goes in the front of the car. So what we're gonna be doing before we put those two things together, we're gonna add our coolant and make sure that there's no leaks, because sometimes a new radiator can be damaged. So we wanna make sure on that, and then we put the coolant and test for leaks, and then we can move on to the other parts. So now we're gonna be using our spill-free funnel, the best investment I ever done to remove air on the engines from the cooling system. What you do is you attach it to a specific cap or adapter that comes to the radiator, and then the funnel falls right into it, and then you fill it up with coolant, and you fill it up about halfway, and then gravity will start doing its job. It will just push. The liquid will try to fall in and the air will come up. So this is how you burp your cooling system on your car, and this is the best investment I ever done. So now we use our funnel, we fill it up with coolant, and start getting the coolant into the car. We're using 50-50. So now that our coolant is not going in more by itself, what we're gonna be doing is we're gonna turn on the engine so the water pump circulates the antifreeze, and it pushes the air out. So now we have put our brand new radiator. We took the air out of the system, so we got fresh coolant in there as well. So now we are gonna put the air duct in there for the intake and the front piece plastic. And one thing I want to say is, once you put this radiator and you thought that the system was overheating or temperature was rising because of radiator, you want to make sure that once you put this radiator in, the new one, you want to make sure that your fans are turning on as well while you're doing this process. So if the radiator was replaced and the overheating is going to continue, you want to make sure why is it continuing at this stage. You want to make sure that your fans kick on. So if there's something wrong that the fans don't kick on, there's something wrong with the system electrical now. So you want to make sure that your radiator is good, and then your fans are kicking in while you're at this stage. So we put the plastics now. And well, folks, this was the replacement of a radiator on a 91 to 94 Toyota Tercel for the manual transmission, and it was pretty simple. The only tools that we used for this procedure was a 10mm socket for the bolts that tie down the fan, and the air duct for the intake to take it to expose this stuff. So their socket was a 12mm socket for the clamps that clamp down the radiator to the frame. And it's pretty simple, nothing fancy. The only thing I want to say is that you want to do this while the car is cold. You don't want to do it when it's hot because you might burn yourself and it can be dangerous. So with that said, hopefully this video was useful, and if you like our video, give us thumbs up, share it, and we'll see you soon with more videos here en el canal y Chano Jose.